good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the part of the world that you're joining from. And I would like to welcome you very warmly to this webinar on career guidance and decent work. This is a very important theme to be debated, and it's an event that is taking place as an ILO initiative in the context of the Global Careers Month. I'm also very happy that we are organizing for the second time this global event, which has mobilized so many people. We have more than 100 events, and we couldn't miss the opportunity to emphasize this important discussion. So I'm happy that you are also interested. We have a very packed session with terrific panel of experts to discuss with. Let's just jump right into what brought us here. Decent work in itself, let's say it's quite a multidimensional concept. It involves a number of things. It involves having access to a fair income. It involves having access to protections at work, to social security, opportunities for personal and professional development, the possibility of enhancing broader social participation, equal opportunities to learn and to progress in your career, dignity at work. So it covers really a number of important issues, and many of them which are actually very, very closely related to what is the bread and butter of career guidance. So what I would like to start with really is just with a kind of ice-breaking exercise to engage you also from that side, your side, in telling us a bit what words describe the role of career guidance in promoting decent work. For that, we're going to set up a Mentimeter. Thank you. So Juan is putting up the Mentimeter. So what I would invite you to do is really just to join the Mentimeter with your phone. I'm going to actually do the same exactly here. Take a photo, join the Mentimeter, and add some words in terms of what words really reflect the role of career guidance in promoting decent work, so that we have a bit of a word cloud going on, and we can take your reflections. Oh, okay. We have already some words coming up. I hope you're better in putting in the words than I am. Okay, so I submitted mine as well. So we have quite a few things appearing. Opportunity is a big one. Respect, inclusion, social justice. Well, this is becoming quite an interesting cloud. There's a lot of things floating around with relations in between each other. Fit for work, access, respect. Inclusion is becoming quite an important dimension here. This is very good. This is very good. Thank you very much. This is really giving us already quite important connections between the themes. Exactly. Making the workforce bigger, yes, but in a good way, right? In the best way possible. Access. Okay, so I think we already have quite a good word cloud here. I mean, I hope that the panelists also took a little bit of note on the words that we had there, because I think they will help us draw some connections. But I mean, it is clear that these notions of decent work and what constitutes career guidance should clearly go hand in hand. I mean, there's a massive overlap in terms of purposes, and that was clear in the words as well that were being depicted there. And career guidance itself is a key enabler for access to decent work. It's really system-wise what allows to connect individual aspirations and perspectives with this big movement, this big labor market dynamics that are currently happening and which are sometimes a bit eventful. It supports transitions, labor market transitions. It can help set up long-term prospects. It affects this misery, which is a resilience, this personal resilience directly empowers people, it's especially tailored for vulnerable groups and people, and really helps people also build pathways to formality. System-wise, it also is something that can make investments in job creation policies and skills more effective. But despite this sort of self-evident connection, and really what happens here is that it should be a no-brainer to integrate career guidance in policy initiatives. This connection is not always clear. So to discuss this, discuss the connection, the challenges, engage in this possible solutions, we have four really good experts to discuss this issue. We have David Bluestein, who is a professor and the Golden Eagle Faculty Fellow in the Department of Counseling, Developmental and Educational Psychology at Boston College. We have Jana Kettunen, who is the president of the International Association for Education and Vocational Guidance, and also professor of guidance and vice rector at the Finnish Institute for Educational Research. This is a long trail to say. Marcelo Afonso Ribeiro comes from the University of São Paulo and is a professor at the Institute of Psychology, also well-known researcher. And Tristan Hooley, professor of career education at the University of Derby, United Kingdom. And you recently, I've heard you've also had the promotion to be the head of the research institute. So all be very welcome to this. I think we are going to jump right into the questions, and really, I would like to hear your perspectives. Taking into account also these words that we've seen. What is the relationship between career guidance and decent work? I mean, David, you've published a lot on this matter. David,
Yes, yes.
and and you've actually been to the ILO to discuss
Hmm.
the subject. Could you really elaborate on how do you think career guidance contributes to achieving decent work, particularly for vulnerable groups in these, unpredictable times?
Well, thank you, Pedro. Thank you for organizing this webinar. And also, I want to express my deep gratitude to my esteemed colleagues on this panel. It's a pleasure to work with all of you. I learned so much from your work and from your presence in our field. So, yeah, I have studied this area a lot. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I was delighted to be at the ILO this past summer. So, considering the question of how career guidance directly contributes to achieving decent work, there's a number of interrelated observations and themes I'd like to share. First, we often understand the availability of decent work as being beyond an individual's control or agency. Decent work was established as a framework, a baseline set of conditions by the ILO as part of their decent work agenda over 20 years ago. So the question of how effective individuals can be in developing meaningful and rewarding work lives really exists on a continuum. In high-income countries with relatively equal distribution of resources, it's more likely that people can navigate their career plans to some degree, which optimally would include consideration of jobs and careers that are decent as per the ILO guidelines. In less resource countries, the challenges are clearly greater. Also, the degree of political freedom that exists within specific regions and countries is another source of barriers, unfortunately becoming an increasingly problematic issue for all of us. So let's consider the optimal way that career guidance can help open up doors to decent work. Optimally, career guidance provides students with self-knowledge, exposure to the world of work, skills in decision-making and exploration, and at its best, a sense of purpose and critical consciousness. A useful metaphor I often use in thinking about career guidance is akin to teaching people to drive. So if people can drive, they can navigate themselves, and they may be able to discern some of the potholes on the road, figure out workarounds. I realize that that metaphor sounds very individualistic, but the reality is when we drive, we're driving on roads built by our communities. We're driving along with other people. So optimally, I think that career guidance needs to rely on a sense of collective support from one's community. So I think at its best, career guidance can help people connect with mentors, other community support, so they could effectively navigate their way to decent work. And another way that career guidance can support people is to inform research that could identify the optimal array of supportive factors that can connect people from all backgrounds to decent work. And finally, career guidance as it is currently manifested, especially by people on this panel, now calls for human rights and decent work for all. So career guidance has now become part of a very strong social justice initiative that I think is global in its scope and mission.
Great. Thank you very much, David. These are very, very good insights, and this links already to a bit to what I want to ask Marcelo, because this really puts contextual elements to the fore. I mean, now careering itself is becoming more of a word in middle and low-income country contexts, but it acquires a very different shape, a very different perspective. And you specifically, Marcelo, you have been developing your work in the Global South, and you have combined your research with actual direct interventions with vulnerable groups. So I know you're developing very good work. And while, as David was hinting, I mean, the role of career guidance is quite clear in high-income countries and more structured societies and more regulated societies, but things are quite different, right? In developing countries. So how do the socioeconomic and cultural contexts linked to this high informality that exists in many countries, levels of poverty, lack of access to formal education, shape the way in which career guidance should be designed and delivered to fulfill this role?
Okay, Pedro, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this important webinar. I think the development of a career guidance framework must take in account the unique education and working context of each country. Central to this approach is integrating career development opportunities in both formal and informal settings. To build such a framework, begin by prioritizing existing community strategies, cultivate a culture of collaboration that views career guidance as communal effort, ensure the framework's language resonates with all stakeholders, contextualize strategies, resources, and tools based on local realities, consistently seek diverse opportunities through dialogue that bridges community experience with specialized guidance, and learn directly from the communities where interventions take place. Six positioning should help in career guidance design and delivery. The first attitude is situate knowledge, and a second attitude is intersectional vision and action. And the third attitude is an intervention that stands to the social and help people achieve education and employment goals. Sharing support and mediate relationships between them and communitarian actors and institutions. The four attitudes, the logic of construction between all involved in this process. The fifth attitude, I think, is the most important. It's the promotion, a narrative changes, but also social repositioning. In other words, career guidance that generate changes in person and possibilities for transformation in the context. And the last attitude assumes that the person is subject to right choices and discourses. One example is the career guidance in a training program of the landless people's movement in Brazil. The program was addressed to young people in the rural sector and aimed to prepare them for work in planting, harvesting, and selling products informally or based on solidarity economic projects. A career guidance program was created based on the existing training program and aimed to help young people understand the challenges of being informal or community farmers and project themselves in the future through work planning. Context matters. If one can speak in their own terms, we realize that another world is possible, and thus fostering decent and dignified work.
Okay, thank you, Marcel. This was so important. You know, the thing is that when you talk to people very frequently, and especially in policy environments, there's this idea. You know, no, we set up a website with some information on some occupations that are trendy, and you know, and then we slot the kids into one of these occupations. No, you just described completely different perspective, right? So we engage locally. This helps build the community, helps really make the training relevant, and helps people connect with what is happening there. So thank you so much for bringing this. So Jana, so your turn. I mean, you've been at the helm now of the IAVG for a while, so you've certainly warmed the seat, and you've been doing great work, at least is my opinion. And surely you had, you know, a vision of a lot of contrasting situations, contexts. So from your perspective, how do you see career guidance playing a significant role to promote decent work across the globe, you know, and, you know, taking into account this diversity, and also because I know it's one of your areas of passion and research, you know, do you think that information communication technologies are also making a difference here? You know, for you to give your impressions.
Thank you, Petra. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to join this panel and colleagues on. It's really delight to be here. Well, across the world, whether we look the highly structured labor markets or very informal ones, people share the common need, as you framed it already. They want to understand their opportunities, develop their strengths, and also the work that is meaningful, safe, and sustainable. And the career guidance, of course, can support this process by, as David already pointed there, to supporting individuals to make informed decisions at the key moments of transition, whether it's a young person to considering the educational opportunities or pathways, or an adult reskilling to the technological changes, or someone moving from informal to more stable forms of work. What I see from the IAVG community is that career guidance is quite adaptable. So practitioners everywhere are finding ways to work within their cultural, economical, and institutional realities, as we already heard here by Marcelo's example. The approaches may differ. So some rely highly professionalized services, others on community-based models or peer networks, but the underlying purpose is shared: to support people's capacity to navigate work, learning, the life questions throughout the life, with the benefits that extend not only to individuals, but also to families and communities. And yes, you probably know my answer to the second question regarding the role of information and communication technology. I do believe that information and communication technology, as being a very broad umbrella, can help us to address diversity, but only when it's used thoughtfully. So digital tools can expand access in regions where professionals are scarce, but they can offer multilingual, low cost or flexible support. The low cost can be questionable, I understand, as we all do. They can also help practitioners to collaborate and share resources, which is, I think, it's a very, very good thing. But technology alone is not a solution. Its value depends on whether it is embedded in ethical, user-centered approach, and whether its development includes the voice of career practitioners and the communities it aims to serve. We need to also keep in mind that digital divide is present strongly still in our societies, and this needs to be addressed. So, career guidance contributes to decent work globally by strengthening people's agency and supporting more equitable access to opportunities. And yes, I think ICT can extend the reach if we design them to complement, not replace, the human relationship at the heart of the guidance, and be mindful about the digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you. That's important to remember that, and I think it links to the work that Tristan is doing, because in a way it's having all these developments integrated within a coherent framework in which really every element is important. I think that a lot of the issues that happen have to do with a piecemeal approach, which you have a disconnection between the elements that are, adopted in the development of career guidance systems. So, Tristan, to you, and passing on to you, I mean, your work has precisely been a lot on this framework level, which is really how do you handle this at a system level? How do you handle this at the level of a country? And so you have quite a bit of analysis and development work in terms of the national frameworks for career guidance and career education. So how do you believe that such frameworks could really advance the role of career guidance in promoting decent work, and for all that matters, in advancing social justice, which I know it's a theme that is very dear to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think where we start from in all of this is when we're talking about something like decent work, and I mean, social justice is another way that we can frame these sorts of things. These are normative frameworks where we're saying something about how we think people's lives should be lived. We're not necessarily saying that these things can be achieved overnight, but we're saying that we have some sense of how people's lives should be lived. And that, for example, if you go to work, you should get some sort of decent pay for it. It should give you some kind of decent quality of life, and so on. And I think when we think about how does such a thing come about, then it's through the actions of lots of different actors. So government policy has a very important role in setting expectations, giving ideas about how this can happen, funding services that might take people in particular directions. But also, I think we need to help people themselves to understand this. And this is, I think, where career guidance is critical, is that we give people insights about what's possible, and we give also people some way of moving forward with that. And then also other actors like employers, educational providers, and so on. And I think one of the reasons why I've been very positive about the idea of creating frameworks is that I think it's a way of getting out on the table clearly what everyone's supposed to be doing in this thing. And that means you move it away from just being, this is a problem for career guidance practitioners and their clients or students, and you start to say, well, if we're going to change how society is going to work, we're going to move towards decent work, then we need individuals to understand more, to perhaps act in different ways. We also need to reflect some of these things into employers and into trade unions and learning organizations and so on. So what we're talking about when we're talking about a framework is some kind of commonly agreed strategy for a country around how they would like careers to work. And then normally what we do is go a level down from that and say a little bit about how that can be operationalized. And so one of the things that I've worked on with the ILO and with other organizations is things like career management skills frameworks. So we talk about what sort of things is it that we would expect people to know in our country if we're going to be an effective country, which is going to be able to be economically sustainable and so on, but also where people are going to be able to move their own careers forward and access the good life. What is that going to be like? And then what does that mean for everybody around? So how might we want employers to change their behavior? How might we want learning providers to change their behaviors and so on. So career guidance is at the center of this. It's a really important place where all of these different stakeholders come together. And I think good career guidance practitioners are working into all of these different systems and trying to bring them together. But the idea of a framework moves this up above just the work of career guidance practitioners and helps us to think about this on a system level. And that's why I think this can be a really important element.
Thank you. I like a lot what you said. You know, I could make it my ringtone, although it would be a long ringtone. But I think that also needs some complementarity in terms of discussion, in terms of how do you incrementally go to the point you want to get. But we'll get to that a bit further ahead. So let us try to discuss a little bit, zoom in a little bit more on the key challenges, really, in terms of making career guidance a sort of a key piece in policy rather than just an addict that you remember. So let's go back to you, David. You know, what do you see as the most pressing challenges in terms of embedding career guidance into systems that really have this aim of promoting decent work? You know, everything is changing, and you know the old services of career guidance are no longer necessarily effective. This open door system does not necessarily work. We need to reach into environments rather than wait for people to go and meet the services. The labor market is very fluid with a lot of different situations. So what do you think are the current challenges?
Great question, Pedro. I think actually you touched on one of the responses, which is to reach into institutions, reach into environments, I think, with different models and different types of interventions. So Jana discussed the focus on IT, and certainly IT-based interventions have been very, very important. We also need to kind of think about connecting career guidance more specifically to education, training, and economic development. And I think that's a place where the ILO can help. So career guidance is, I think for me, I've devoted my life's work to this area. I think it's a really important intervention. It could be life-changing. It's a bit out of touch with recent changes in the labor market. And I think the best example, I'm sure we all think about this, is AI. I mean, 2 years ago, we weren't thinking as much. We were talking about AI, but we weren't using it all the time. So career guidance is beginning to catch up, but that's an example of how hard it is to keep that labor market information current. And I know Tristram and his colleagues are working on the issues of labor market information in really thoughtful and creative ways. Career guidance needs to be part of the conversation about decent work and more broadly about the ILO's decent work agenda. I think the publication of the ILO Career Development Frameworks is a great, really important initiative that represents an important synthesis between these two bodies, the career guidance community and the ILO. I also advocate that we seriously advocate for more lifelong career guidance. And I know in the United States, we have a very porous system of career guidance throughout our country, but particularly for adults, where sometimes it's available in some states and it's often not available at low cost. And I think that's an important way that we could embed career guidance in a more integrated way. For example, as people are moving through periods of unemployment, I think we need to build in really good, effective, evidence-based career guidance into those institutions. We've had that sporadically in the US. I know other countries have a better system for using career guidance to help people who are unemployed. Another suggestion is to build decent work into career guidance models. And my colleagues and I have done this with our psychology of working theory. One of the things that we did when we moved psychology of working from a framework to a theory is to add decent work at the center of our theoretical model. And we did this with a very clear intentionality. The intention was to not just create a really good theory, but also to link career guidance to this public policy initiative of the ILO. And I think that's an example of how we can integrate these institutions. So it's a good question. I'm looking forward to other people's comments.
Thank you, David. And I think some notes for colleagues of the ILO who are joining today. I want to now move on to Marcelo, in picking up on the instability of the labor market, and what are the conditions actually in the global South. We can say, Marcelo, that precarity is really part of the way of living in many countries. I mean, there's no escape from it. And this issue of career guidance services not being necessarily adequate to reach out to people is very pressing. It might not reach to people in the informal economy. Sometimes there are online solutions, but they're really not adjusted to realities. We don't know what their impact is. We don't know if they're really relevant in helping people access, financing, being more effective in being entrepreneurs, searching for recognition of prior learning, etc. And people themselves might not see the value in career guidance. What should I do this for? Why should I engage in this for? What are the challenges, in your opinion, in these contexts to make career guidance accessible?
Yes, it's a very important point. The definition of a career guidance framework and how it should be developed changes according to education and work context. However, we must include the possibility of career development in both formal and informal working contexts. And we should realize that for the most part, the context of the low and middle income countries are distinct from the context of high income countries. And career development support and interventions reflect different opportunity structures, cultural understandings, and institutional makeups. For example, career guidance interventions are usually not exclusively based on formal education or training institutions and occur in an extended way in existing social resources such as NGOs and community associations. To achieve this, we must convince policymakers that career guidance should be part of the range of public labor policy actions, not just education, as a tool for social protection that can be a vital tool for transforming lives, improving work conditions, and increase autonomy. I might say that the main challenges for the design implementation of career guidance in contexts marked by informality or informal settings is first of all, a social challenge to include stakeholders, partner institutions, and agents from people's communities of origin in the development and implementation of career guidance, and a political institutional challenge to convince political agents of the importance of considering career guidance as part of the public education and labor policy system. A technical challenge of clarifying the scope and relevance of career guidance to everyone, breaking with stereotypes, for example, that career guidance is limited to helping young people choose a career. A training challenge of preparing professionals capable of working with a wide variety of people, and an ethical political challenge of promoting the integration of common good as the purpose of our work as practitioners and researchers in career guidance field. Does this help? I think this help ensure the prospect of a decent, dignified future of working. This is the main challenge, I think.
These are very good points, and I think I'm especially keen on this idea of embedding career guidance in a number of policies. I mean, and seeing it really as a transversal, tool that can be used flexibly, and and there are, and it's relevant for distinct context. I think that there is still a very slow awakening to this dimension on behalf of the policy community. Jana, another community is the practitioner community, right? And we have been talking more about policy, but not so much about practitioners, of people who are in the front lines. And I would suggest that you have a pulse of what the community thinks. They frequently have to operate with low training, lack of resources, lack of standards completely in many countries. They're also challenged by the growing role of digital technologies. Many of them might not know how to use or advise how to use or use it in complementarity, the tools which are currently available. What do you think is what are the major challenges that practitioners are facing at the moment, in your opinion?
Well, thank you for the very important question, and everyone understand how large the question is as such. So, and I think you listed quite many of those key challenges that practitioners are facing. I hear from practitioners around the world that, as I mentioned, they are deeply committed to supporting individuals. But you ask that what might be the biggest challenge that they are facing. So I think one that I hear often is not the worry, but the wording out that how do we reach those who actually do not come to your door? So how do we make ourselves better available for those groups who actually are not yet under the career guidance practitioner service or the service that we are designed. So this is one challenge. But as you mentioned, many work environments are very limited with the resources. So practitioners have large case losses, insufficient time for reflective practice depending the environments where they are working, and also quite a little access to continuous professional development. Without the investment in training and supervision, it becomes really difficult for practitioners, as they described, to stay current with the evolving information, how to interpret them, evolving labor market trends, new pedagogy, and of course the technologies that were mentioned here. Secondly, if we look at the global scale, as you mentioned also, the absence of clear professional standards in many countries weakens both the quality and the visibility of educational, vocational, and career guidance. When the role is poorly defined, practitioners often have to justify their relevance rather than being recognized as an integral part in education and employment systems. And as already pointed here with the colleagues, the digitalization really, it brings the opportunities, but also real challenges. The practitioners are on today's expect to adapt the tools, new tools quickly, but yet they are not given the training, proper training, or they don't have chance to influence even the tools that come to what they are expected to use. So many feel that technology is pushed onto them instead of being co-designed or support their work and the needs of the client. And one thing is that we hear that sometimes practitioners feel that they're quite alone. So they work in silos, although that we talk that guidance cuts across the education, employment, and social services, but the systems themselves are, as Tristram were already also pointing, are rarely aligned. So without coordination, practitioners struggle to provide holistic support or to refer clients effectively. Mm-hmm. So to make more a significant role, practitioners seek recognition, professional structures, and investment. When we empower them, we strengthen the entire system and ultimately improve people's access to decent work and good life. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think this is a tremendously important discussion. I mean, this lack of alignment is even existent in sectors where you wouldn't expect, education, clearly. And especially in countries where you're still giving the first steps in the development of the system, there's normally very little thought given to these aspects, but this informs for the developments that come afterwards. So I think there's a whole discussion to happen about the qualification of the staff, the diverse type of staff that is involved in this. But we don't have time to dwell on that specifically. Tristan, back to you. Let's go to the policy level again, to the national policies. You know, what do you think are really the barriers here to integrate career guidance? I mean, I ask this question to myself frequently, you know, especially in low and middle income countries. Is this a matter of resources, or are governments missing the plot? Is it, you know, sort of it's important sometimes, some other times it isn't? You know, what do you think?
Well, it's always about resources, isn't it? But I think actually there's a more fundamental level we should just acknowledge here, which is what is career guidance doing? And if you think about what it's doing, it's fundamentally about helping people to move from one part of their life to another part of their life. So it has this sort of transversal nature, that it's about moving from school to work, or from unemployment to employment, or whatever it might be. This is what we're doing in career guidance. And if we think about it like that, it's not surprising that governments find it difficult, because governments don't think like that. So what we think is we're dealing with individuals. They have within their life, they have a thing that ties everything together, which is their career. That's the integrative structure that career guidance professionals work with. Governments don't think like that. They think we have a Ministry of Education, we have a Ministry of Employment, we have a Ministry of Social Protection, and so on. And so government doesn't really recognize that people move from being somebody who's dealt with in the Ministry of Education to somebody who's dealt with in the Ministry of Labour, and so on. And this is why I think fundamentally it is challenging, is that we operate in between the bits that government pays attention to. And so when we're trying to make a case for the value of career guidance, and we're saying things, as I said before, we need strategies, we need structures, we need frameworks, and so on. The government says, yes, but whose ministry is this going to sit in? And I think where we see this working best, and I mean, Jana can probably say more about this, but when we did some work recently in Finland, we see actual integrative structures at the level of government, but also at the level of localities, where people bring together initiatives that come from one ministry and another ministry and actively tie them together. And I think if we're thinking about how we do career guidance well, it has to be about sort of taking on that fact that we're often working between the things that government pays attention to.
You're hinting at very important background issues. I mean, this has to do with, as you institutionalize a certain type of activity. I mean, the same happened with education. I mean, you buy into a number of issues which have to do with the established structure of government, the way budgets are defined and allocated, and all of that. That doesn't necessarily serve the citizen, and it doesn't necessarily serve all citizens in all contexts. So. But I mean, I was interested in you talking about solutions, because, I mean, you have some countries in mind, right? You have some examples or some ideas about what's working. You talk a little bit about Finland. Can you just talk a little bit more about some examples, you know, and what makes them succeed, really?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different problems that we're trying to solve, and I guess some of the work that we did with the ILO was more about solving issues around, I suppose, cultural or epistemic type of issues that we need to, when we're bringing career guidance systems and developing career guidance systems, we need to recognize that there are local realities that might be different as we move from one country to another. And I mean, and that can be true even in countries that are relatively similar. So, you know, for example, the training system that we have in Sweden for career guidance professionals is quite different to have in other Nordic countries, and that shapes the nature of their system. But I think the bit that I was talking about before that I think is very important is that we do need some kinds of structures that exist between ministries, and also not only between ministries, but also between stakeholders. So we see, you know, for example, in Germany at one point, we've had the various kinds of more corporatist structures that have brought together training, you know, career guidance professionals, the unions, the employers, the government, and into kind of common discussions. We see that in some countries. I think where we have some countries where we have structures for interministerial cooperation. We have other countries where we have single systems where these things are essentially delivered. So if we looked in somewhere like Estonia, for example, we would see something that's more akin to a single system rather than a series of fragmented systems in different ministries. So I think there are a number of different ways we can solve this problem, but this issue of sort of collaboration and coordination between both government actors and non-government actors, I think is absolutely critical if we're going to make this work at a sort of systemic level.
Thank you, Tristan. But I mean, you're giving examples. Yeah, of course, they're quite mostly countries which are quite well developed. So maybe I turn to Marcelo a little bit, and Marcelo, and ask you a bit the same question, because I mean, many of these examples, these things work if you have a highly structured system and have institutions that are solid, that work well, have social dialogue that is also operating well. But then when you go to many countries in the global south, these resource limitations, system development, institutional limitations, they are very pressing. They limit a lot what you can do. So I suppose you need to take an incremental approach to system development. From your experience, from your work, can you give some examples on how countries can step into the stepwise development? Do you depart from programs? Do you, like, for example, in your work with youth, transitioning into the labor market, do you think that partnerships can be useful as well? Well, just give us some hints.
Yeah. And first of all, I think the most important modern thing or most important thing is that any career guidance program should always be preceded by meetings and conversation with all involved in the construction of the strategy. It's not a pre-planned strategy. We need to do this in articulation of specialized practitioners, the holders of technical knowledge, and with all actors of the context where the project will carry out. I might say the holders of everyday knowledge. That is important because the cultural difference. Those partners are fundamental to building effective career guidance support for everyone. In this sense, career guidance can be developing, I might say, in 3 levels of complementary actions. First, by existing formalized support programs for career development in the education system. For example, career education program in secondary school is more traditional. Second, pre-established institutional service of support for working issues. For example, entrepreneurial development programs. And finally, the most important, I think, for the Global South countries, the civil society-based support by establishing partnership with institutions, public and private, and organized institutions like trade unions, community associations, NGOs, and mainly social and communitary movements, Black movement, feminist movement, LGBT movement, landless people movement, as I give it an example later, for this task. And discussing the schooling community, including family, role model, and employer cooperations is to be a key point to develop career guidance frameworks and programs in the Global South countries. I think the aim of youth service should be increase autonomy and the quality of work without imposing a formula, but respecting each young, their values, resources, and possibilities of their context. And the sense career development is a signal and support to face the old problem of guarantee the universal right to decent work and the new challenge of promoting decent work in context marked by formality. And thus career guidance for youth and the Global South context represent a fundamental action to invest in people's capacity to reduce the entry in the formal economy, expand decent work opportunities in the formal labor market, and generate more autonomy, increase the sense of community. That's very important. as proposed by the human-centered approach that to the future of work for ILO Center and Declaration for the future of work. I think this is a very brief ideas about that.
So thank you, Marcelo, for also practical ideas. And I think you answered to a large extent one of the questions that people were posing in the chat, whose responsibility is to provide career guidance. And I mean, there's a shared responsibility, right? And so, of course, governments have large responsibility and initiative, a bit like happens in education and training. But then the way you do it is really coordinating these efforts, putting together this multiple perspectives and resources, and pooling resources to find solutions. I also agree a lot with this practical pointers that you said, things that you can do in developing countries. And I find that, for example, this investment in career education models can be very interesting. But again, it's still, a lot of countries are still giving the first steps. So I think a lot of exchange is necessary here for countries to learn from each other's experiences. Going back to you and the IAVG again, how do you believe that the knowledge sharing, this international knowledge sharing, the cooperation, and these initiatives that frequently IAVG promotes itself can help the development of career guidance systems with this relevance, especially in these low and middle income country contexts? Do you have examples that actually work?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that the international cooperation is absolutely essential for strengthening the career guidance system, especially on the low and middle income countries where resources may be constrained, but innovation is vibrant. What the cooperation brings is not a one-size-fits-all model, but really to examine ideas, tools, and lessons that can be adapted to local contexts. So this kind of cooperation and knowledge sharing, it further helps countries to learn from each other, and while respecting the cultural traditions and labor market realities. Well, of course, under being the president of IAVG, what IAVG is that we have the international conference and regional workshops that have been particularly effective in fostering this kind of cooperation. IAVG rotates or aims to have the conference in different continents in order to make these regular events that can then bring colleagues from different, so practitioners, researchers, and policymakers together to learn and share thinking. So these bring the opportunities to exchange and develop and build long-term professional networks. And many, even the LMIC-based practitioners have told us that these exchanges have helped them to create new connections, get inspired, and then also find that there are associations or projects within their region. And one other example from the IAVG is the ethical guidelines, which is an example of global collaboration. So we've included low and middle income countries to contribute to shaping the shared set of values around dignity, autonomy, and fairness in guidance. Several countries have used these guidelines as a reference for improving their professional standards. So there's a number of examples on associations that are taking place and bringing people together from different continents to share, and it would take quite a long time for me to, and I must also admit that they are so active that I try to keep update what is going, but I encourage you also to look the regional, national associations and find and get involved on such activities. Of course, the one other example is what the international organizations are doing in system level. So comparing the system and doing the system reviews. And I think this is this is a process which helps governments to see the career guidance not as isolated service, but as a part of broader strategy for skills, youth, and inclusive. So international collaboration matters because it accelerates learning, avoids duplication of effort, and helps countries build systems that are both locally meaningful and globally connected.
Hey,
So,
thank you. So
thank you.
important message for those who are building up their systems. You're not alone at regional level, not alone at global level. So there are structures you can tap into, friends. David, so coming back to you, but at the end, and I'll ask you to be very succinct. We're running out of time. You know, you've heard a lot about this diversity, system diversity, contextual diversity. You know, the impression I get is that also this idea of decent work also changes across contexts. It's not the same to, you know, what's the notion of decent work in Vancouver and in Dhaka? I mean, it's surely not the same despite its core principles. You know, going forward, how can we advance the role of career guidance in expanding actually this understanding of decent work across all these contexts? You know, do you have, you know, some examples to share with us, or you know, this transformative potential?
Okay, yeah, I'll be very concise here. I have two thoughts. One is I have written in the past about expanding the notion of decent work beyond this kind of rudimentary baseline. I realize it's a contentious question because the rudimentary baseline provides a kind of benchmark, a global benchmark. But I think it might be useful for us to think about ways in which decent work can be defined in particular regions, and to kind of think about really infusing more of a social justice, racial justice ethic into decent work. Another idea is to infuse some of the career guidance aspirations that we have in our theories and practices of helping people to find rewarding, purposeful work, and perhaps naming these things as aspirations. And if we don't name it, we don't identify it, it's clear that we're not going to pay enough attention to it. So I think the issue of the quality of people's work lives is really important. In terms of an inspirational example, we'll just share one very quickly, which is this idea of helping people who are unemployed or struggling to get into the labor market, help them reframe how they understand the causes of this. This is something we've seen in a number of intervention projects, some of which I've been very involved in, trying to help people reframe their locus of causality for understanding why they might be unemployed or why they are struggling to get 21st century skills. Helping people to develop structural analyses to understand that, I think, is really important. And I hearken back to the work of Paulo Freire from Brazil, who did such important work in expanding this notion of critical consciousness. I think that could be a really powerful tool in infusing a particular aspect of career guidance into a sector of the population that's really struggling, which is people who've been laid off and kind of, you know, basically discarded from the labor market. And for them to look at it from a structural perspective would help to provide protective factors for them psychologically.
Okay, thank you very much. More notes for us to take in the ILO as well. Thank you, David. So to close, I would just ask each one of you, you know, can you give us a very concise takeaway or call to action, you know, in terms of guidance for decent work, you know, during this Global Careers Month that we're having now. Tristan, maybe you first. For policymakers, do you have call to action?
Well, for policymakers, I'd say this has actually got huge potential. Engaging with career guidance has got huge potential to deliver quite a wide range of policy outcomes. And I think that it's something which is often neglected for the reasons we've talked about. But I would say for the audience in this meeting, talk to your policymakers and make your ideas and your voices known with policymakers, because I think they don't just come to these ideas in a vacuum. It's part of our role as citizens to inform them about career guidance.
Thank you. Marcelo, same thing, but but let's say in the global south countries, what's the message for policymakers?
I think that the main message is career guidance is a social protection measure that can promote decent and dignified work in both formal and informal contexts. Please give careful consideration to invest in the development of public policies and career guidance program in each country, mainly through partnerships with civil society organizations. I think it will ensure a better working future for all through career guidance, and it's easy and effective.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Very strong. David, if you had to send a message, for workers and, and everyone who's investing in human resource development.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the word cloud. The word that came up that I thought was one of the biggest was opportunity. I think we need to focus on opportunity, but we need to focus on opportunity in a way that will expand people's horizons for decent work and also dignified work. And I think that people, in my work, I've thought a lot about the need for survival and the need for self-determination and need for social contribution. The need for survival often overshadows our desire for decent work conditions. And I think that we need to create social structures that will help to create support systems for people, safety nets, or as Marcelo talked about, protective, a sense of social protections that will keep people safe. And then I think that will help societies a lot. We know that people who are attached to work are more likely to engage in a sense of cohesion and to feel connected to their communities.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, David. Jana, finally with you, a word for practitioners. Give us
Well,
your
I
word.
give you 2 words. I come back a little bit back what Tristan was saying. Let's keep talking about the importance of the work that we are doing and collaboration and knowledge sharing with practitioners, researchers, and policymakers.
Okay, thank you very much. We are really over the time. There was only 2 minutes, but over the time we tried to be as as accurate as possible. Thank you to all who were with us in this this good conversation, and thank you to all the panelists that really gave really good insights, good contributions. And I hope we will be all together soon, collaborating with each other, exchanging in other fora. And until next time, and a good continuation of a Global Careers Month. Okay. Thank you.